Page 150, Chapter 3. Russell was sharp on Sunday against Palo Alto. Jimmy and Todd both went 3 for 4. Todd had a homer and Jimmy had 2 more doubles. Both made great plays in the field. Todd snagged a sinking liner in the 3rd. In the 6th, Jimmy fielded a shot deep in the hole and fired across the diamond in time. I banged out 2 hits and scored twice, but it seemed like everybody scored twice. We crushed them 14-2. That game, Jimmy and I turned our first double plays of the season. The first came in the 2nd inning when the game was still close. Palo Alto had runners on the corners with 1 out. The ball was a sharp grounder to Jimmy's right. He speared it, turned, fired the ball to me. I unloaded quickly and doubled up the runner. That was a pretty one, and it took some air out of Palo Alto. The 2nd didn't matter so much. We were up 13-2 in the 6th. They had a runner on first, and the batter smacked a 1-hopper right to me. Once I fielded it, the double play was automatic. Still, it felt good to see 4-6-3 in the scorebook when the game was over. At 3-0, we were off to a great start. But there was still the problem of the 2nd starter. Charant spent all of Tuesday's practice going over mechanics with Alex. Leg kick, release point, follow through. In the locker room after practice, Alex looked tight. "It'll be okay, Alex," I said to him as I headed to the shower. "It'll be okay." He gave me a weak smile. Todd stopped and said something to Alex too, and when I came out of the shower, I saw Jimmy with him. We all knew how much was riding on his left arm. At school Wednesday, I was hoping to see Alex so I could give him a good word. I hated to think of him working himself into a total state like he'd done before. But I didn't see him, or Jimmy either, until we were actually on the field warming up for the game. And then I didn't like what I saw. Alex wasn't jumpy, but his face was green and he had bags under his eyes. We started fast. Maxwell singled up the middle. I laid down a bunt to move him to second. Jimmy lined out to center, but Todd ripped a double to bring Maxwell home. When Mitty's pitcher uncorked a wild pitch, Todd took third and he scored when the second baseman booted Pacheco's grounder. Alex looked sick, but his fastball was wicked. He struck out the leadoff batter on 3 pitches and then hit the next guy in the thigh. "Keep humming them in there," Jimmy called, and that's what Alex did. The number 3 and the number 4 hitters both went down swinging at fastballs. We pecked away at Mitty, scoring again in the 3rd and putting up 2 more in the 4th. Alex stayed fast and wild, throwing a million pitches, striking out a slew of guys and walking a slew of guys. That kind of pitching is murder on fielders. It's hard to keep on your toes. I made my first error in the 4th, and Jimmy had one too. Still, at the end of 5 innings, we were up 6-0. Alex had 10 strikeouts, but was totally exhausted. Charant lifted him and brought in Alan Willis. Willis is a good guy, but he doesn't have much stuff. Mitty scored twice in the 6th, then once more in the 7th. They even brought the tying run to the plate before Charant called on Radinsky to close it out. After the game, we all crowded around Alex's locker, telling him how great he'd done. He was happy, but somehow not as happy as he should have been. "Are you all right?" I asked. Yeah, I'm fine," he answered. As we moved back toward our own lockers, Todd turned to me. "You know what's wrong with him?" "No," I answered. "What?" "He's hungover. So's your friend Jimmy." "What are you talking about?" I said. "Jimmy's found some hole-in-the-wall grocery where he can buy beer. He's been hounding guys to go drinking with him." I was confused. "And you never go, I suppose?" Todd looked at me like I was out of my mind. "Are you crazy? After last year, maybe I'm not as bright as you, Seth, but I'm not stupid." I opened my locker and pulled out my clothes. Todd stayed right with me. "So why are you telling me all of this?" I asked him. He shrugged. "I'm telling you because you're Jimmy's best friend. Unless somebody does something, he's going to get himself kicked off the team. And he's going to take other guys with him. Goodbye league championship. Goodbye state tournament. Goodbye everything we're working for." "What did you want me to do?" "Talk to him," Todd said. "He might listen to you." That night I thought long and hard about what Todd had said, and for a while I was mad at him. He was the guy who had gotten Jimmy started with drinking. In a way, the whole thing was his fault. He was trying to dump it all on me. It wasn't fair. Then I considered dumping it onto somebody else. Adults are always saying you should report stuff like drinking for the good of your friends so they can get help, but I knew all along I wouldn't report Jimmy. Charant would suspend him. Another mistake and Jimmy would get booted off the team. Big help that would be. Todd was right. It was up to me to talk sense to Jimmy, but I couldn't just call him up and say, "Hey Jimmy, stop acting like a fool." I had to pick the right place and the right time. Chapter 4. Finding the right place and time wasn't easy. I was up at 6 every morning. I'd finish my homework, polish off a couple bowls of cereal, and leave for school by 7. My first class was at 7:30. The school day flew by. Chemistry, English, history, gym, lunch, French, and study hall. I suppose I could have talked to Jimmy after practice or called him at night, but I didn't do it. Twice during the next week, Todd asked me if I'd done anything, and both times I had to shake my head. "It's going to explode in his face," Todd said the second time. "I'm telling you, right in his face." That week we had games against Cupertino and Santa Cruz. We won 12-0 and 11-3. Neither team could field, and their pitchers kept coming in with fat pitches. Jimmy had a season in those 2 games. 7 hits, 2 of them home runs, and 3 of them doubles. Maybe that's another reason I didn't say anything. When a guy is hitting .550, it's tough to tell him he's screwing up the team. Jimmy wasn't the only guy doing well. Russell pitched a shutout on Wednesday, and Alex, calmer with each victory, struck out 8 in 5 innings on Sunday. I went 3 for 9. The only player who slumped was Todd. He went 0 for 8 with 4 strikeouts. During Monday's practice, the ball was jumping off of our bats, and guys were making circus catches in the field. We were winning and loose and happy, or at least that's how it seemed. At the end of the practice, Charant blew the whistle, and we hit the track for the 2-mile run. As usual, Charant took the early lead. Jimmy didn't challenge him, not even for a lap, but Todd ran right at Charant's shoulder. Todd's face was grim, his eyes determined. It was as if he were trying to run out of all the frustration of his batting slump. In the last 100 yards, he turned it on, and he beat Charant by 10 yards. In the locker room afterward, the guys were congratulating Todd, giving him high fives. He didn't even crack a smile. Instead, he strode over to Jimmy's locker. "Where were you, Winter?" he demanded. "What are you talking about?" Jimmy asked. "During the race, where were you?" Jimmy closed his locker. "I didn't have it today, that's all. Today was your day." "How come you didn't have it?" Jimmy pulled on his socks. "I just didn't have it. What's it to you?" "Are you hungover, Winter?" Todd asked. "Is that why you couldn't run?" Jimmy turned bright red. "Who are you, my mom? Mind your own business. If it affects the team, it's my business. You're going to blow everything for everybody." Jimmy stood, stared him in the eye. "I'll tell you who's going to blow everything. You. And you know why? Because you can't hit anymore. You're a choker." Immediately, Todd took a swing at Jimmy, catching him on the top of the head and knocking him back over the bench. Jimmy scrambled to his feet, ready to mix it up, but Pacheco and Johnson pulled them apart. Chapter 5. That settled it. There was no more sitting on the fence. I had to do something. After dinner, I picked up the phone and started to punch in Jimmy's number. Halfway through, I stopped. Some things you can't talk about over the phone. When I rang the doorbell, Jimmy's mother answered. "He's in his room," she said. I found him sitting on the floor, his baseball cards in front of him like he was a little kid. "Hey, Seth, what's up?" "Nothing much," I answered. "I thought maybe you'd want to go get a pizza or something." "Sure, why not?" He slowly gathered up his cards and put them carefully away. Then we drove over to the round table at on the El Camino. "So what's the deal?" Jimmy said once we'd bought our food. I beat around the bush. "The team is never going to win with you and Todd fighting." He gave me a half smile. "What are you talking about? Lots of teams have guys who don't get along, and they win." "I don't have to tell you that. You've read every baseball book there is." We ate in silence for a while, then I came out with it. "Or if you get kicked off the team for drinking." He leaned back in his chair. "So that's it." He shook his head. "Okay, I have a few beers sometimes. Big deal. Half the kids in the school drink. If I remember correctly, you used to be one of them." I felt like a hypocrite, but I plunged forward. "So I used to drink. So what? It was stupid then, and it's stupid to keep being stupid." Jimmy bent his straw back and forth a few times. "Seth, do me a favor. Take care of yourself. Take care of second base. And I promise you, I'll take care of myself, and I'll take care of shortstop. Is that a deal?" I'd gone too far to back down now. "No, it's not a deal." I paused. "Look," I said, "you've got to." Jimmy stood, leaned forward across the table so that his face was right in mine. "Seth, mind your own business, okay? Mind your own business." Chapter 6, page 157. Tuesday, Todd's hand was so swollen he couldn't throw or hit. "What happened?" Sharon asked. "I was helping my dad unload bricks," Todd explained, "and one of them dropped." That raised Sharon's eyebrows. My hand once was swollen like that, but it was from a fist fight." Todd kept his cool. "I wasn't in a fight. I dropped a brick on it. You can call my dad." Wednesday afternoon, we were on the road against Sequoia. Todd's hand was still swollen. He wanted to play, but Charant wouldn't go along. "Let it heal. It's a long season. Bill McDonald will play center." Sequoia's pitcher was like Furman, fast and wild. In the first, Maxwell walked to lead off, and then he stole second. I struck out, but Jimmy singled home. Pacheco walked, and then McDonald walked to load the bases. One more hit would have broken the game open, but Dorrego and Hill both popped up. That's how the game went for us. Lots of runners, but not many runs. We scored again in the third, and then Jimmy hit one out of the ballpark to lead off the sixth. It was an incredible home run. If the ball hadn't hit a eucalyptus tree, it would have landed on the El Camino. Heading to the bottom of the seventh, we led 3-0. Russell had given up only 2 hits and 1 walk, but Charant wasn't taking any chances. He had Radinsky warming up in the bullpen. Sequoia's leadoff hitter took a weird little half swing on Russell's first pitch. The ball kind of knuckled out towards short right. I dived and had the ball in the leather of my glove, but When I hit the ground, it popped loose. I walked the ball into Russell feeling pretty down. Forget it, Seth, he said. The next batter bounced a seeing eye single right up the middle. That brought the tying run to the plate. Russell took off his cap, ran his hand through his hair, and put his cap back on. Then he stretched, looked the runners back, delivered. The ball flashed and the ball rocketed down the line into the left field corner. By the time Pacheco fired it back to the infield, 2 runs were in, and the tying runner was standing at third. Charant brought in Radinsky. We played the infield in, trying to cut off the run at the plate. Radinsky struck out the first guy he faced, but then walked the next batter on a 3-2 fastball that I swear was a strike. Runners were at the corners with only 1 out. Charant and Jimmy and me moved back to double play depth. That was great, feeling his confidence in us. Hit to me, I thought, or hit to Jimmy. I wanted to prove to Charant that he was right, that we could turn 2 in the clutch. But instead of hitting a grounder, Sequoia's hitter smacked a line drive to straightaway center. That's the hardest ball to judge, 1 hit right at you. McDonald took 1 fatal step back, then charged. At the last second, he dived, trying for a shoestring catch. For an instant, I thought he'd done it, but then I saw the ball rolling out toward the center field fence. By the time Pacheco ran the ball down, the tying and winning runs had crossed the plate. The Sequoia guys were going crazy, and our heads were hanging. It's only 4 miles from Sequoia to Woodside, but that bus ride took forever. McDonald sat alone. He was blaming himself, but nobody else was blaming him. If Todd hadn't taken a swing at Jimmy, he would have been in the center field, and he would have caught that line drive. Every guy on the team knew it. Mind your own business. That's what Jimmy had told me to do. Maybe he was right. Chapter 7. The first St. Francis game was at home on Sunday afternoon. They were undefeated, so a loss would drop us 2 back and just about to end our chances for the league title and the state tournament berth that went with it. Alex was starting for us, and he had his good stuff. The St. Francis guys were flinching, stepping in the bucket, striking out. Every once in a while, Alex would uncork a wild pitch, and that really unnerved them. Randy Morris pitched for St. Francis. Curveball, changeup, curveball, fastball. No pattern, no 2 pitches the same speed. Their first time up, I lunged at a curve and grounded to first. The next time around, I was out in front of a changeup and struck out. I wasn't the only guy having trouble. Even Jimmy looked bad, grounding out softly in his first 2 at-bats. Todd had a single in the second, and Lance Johnson got another in the third, but after 6 innings, those 2 hits were all we had. But they were 2 more hits than St. Francis had. When Alex came out to start the 7th, he was working on a no-hitter. He was also dead tired. After he finished his warm-ups, he leaned forward, his hands on his knees, a sure sign of exhaustion. St. Francis's leadoff hitter took the first 2 pitches for balls. He stepped out, looked down the third base line for a sign. With a 2-0 count late in the scoreless game, it's automatic to take. At least that's what I thought. I'm sure it's what Alex thought too, because he grooved a fastball right down the middle. The guy swung away, and did he ever hit it? A bolt down the left field line. There was never any doubt about the distance, but I kept thinking it was going to curve foul, that it had to curve foul. After it cleared the fence, the umpire stared long and hard, then raised his right hand, pointed his finger in the air, and rotated his wrist, the signal for a home run. Everyone was stunned. In a pitcher's duel, it sometimes seems as though no one will ever score. So to have it happen, bang, was like walking into a swinging door. Charant hooked Alex. Radinsky retired the next 3 batters on groundouts. I ran to the dugout, slumped onto the bench. I'll admit I thought our chances were down the tubes. We hadn't been able to touch Morris, and warming up behind him was Steve Cannon. Then Jimmy stood, his green eyes on fire. He looked up and down the bench. "Don't quit," he said to everyone and no one. "If you get me to the plate, I'll win this game for you, I promise." It was an incredible thing to say. Had anybody else said it, I would have thought he was making a fool of himself, but I believed in Jimmy. We all did. It wasn't just talk. If Jimmy got the chance, he'd deliver. But that was a big if. Jimmy was batting 5th that inning. We'd need 2 base runners to bring him up. The inning started well. Dan Hill looped a dying quail into the short right. Without hesitating, he flew around first and went into second head first. The throw was offline, and we had the tying run in scoring position. St. Francis's coach walked slowly to the mound. There was never any doubt they'd made Steve Cannon a reliever for exactly this situation. What a pitcher. My stomach knotted as I watched Cannon warm up. He seemed bigger and stronger and faster than ever. And what style. He had everything slow. He did everything slow. He rubbed the ball up slow. He got the sign from the catcher slow. He tied his shoes slow. Then he'd go into the motion and the ball would explode out of his hand. Charant wanted Johnson to bunt Hill to third, but from there, Hill could score on a ground out, a sac fly, a wild pitch, a pass ball. Good strategy, but Cannon ruined it by burning 3 hard fastballs right by Johnson for the first out. Maxwell stepped into the batter's box, and I moved to the on-deck circle. Maxwell choked up on the bat, but it didn't do him any good. Cannon blew 2 strikes by him, wasted a curve inside, then struck him out with another untouchable fastball. 2 outs. I started toward the plate, feeling like I was going to my execution, when Jimmy grabbed my elbow. His fingers dug so deeply into my flesh it hurt. "Get on base, Seth," he said, his eyes boring into me. "I'll try, Jimmy," I whispered. "Don't try," he answered. "Do it." I stood way back in the batter's box, so far back I could barely reach the outside corner of the plate. I told myself standing deep would give me more time to catch up with Cannon's fastball, but the true reason was fear. Cannon looked like an animal out on the mound. His hair was matted down and his eyes were as wild as Jimmy's. Cannon stretched, checked the runner at second, came in. Fastball right down the pike, belt high. I swung level and smooth and caught nothing but air. I stepped out. "Get a hit!" Jimmy screamed at me. The guys on the bench were screaming the same thing. Our chances for the league championship, the state tournament, were riding on my at-bat. My head was pounding. I felt like turning on everyone, screaming back at them. "But I can't do it, don't you understand? I'm not good enough." I adjusted my helmet, stepped back in. Cannon went into his stretch, then blew another fastball by me for strike 2. Right then, when everything seemed completely hopeless, an idea came to me. It was a long shot, but it was my only shot. At 0-2, Cannon might waste a curveball inside. I inched closer to the plate. Cannon delivered, and then it was there, right on me, only not a curve, but a fastball 6 inches inside. It's one thing to think about taking one for the team, but as that ball was bearing down on me like a train, every nerve in my body screamed that I should jump back. I willed myself to hang in there. I willed it. I took the fastball square in the back. The pain roared up my spine and filled my brain, driving me to my knees. I don't know what it feels like to be shot, but it can't be a whole lot worse than being hit by a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. "Take your base," the umpire yelled. As I started to get up, I felt Charant's hand on my shoulder. "Take a few deep breaths." I didn't argue. I felt like my body was stuck in a vice that somebody was tightening little by little. When I finally stood, Charant sent Duncan in to run for me. "Way to go," he whispered as he led me back to the bench. "Way to go." I'm not a nail-biter, but as I sat on the bench fighting the pain, I bit them. Jimmy Winter versus Steve Cannon. Power versus power. Cannon's first pitch was a fastball down the heart of the plate. Jimmy uncoiled but missed it. Strike 1. The park quieted as Cannon walked around the mound a little. The noise slowly built as he returned to the rubber. He stretched, came in with another fastball. This time Jimmy caught a piece of it and sent a foul back into the screen. Jimmy stepped out. He rubbed some dirt into his batting gloves while Cannon rubbed up the ball. The noise built again, louder than before. Cannon won't be able to blow another one past Jimmy. I remember thinking, Jimmy's going to nail this one. Cannon towed the rubber, stretched. No waste pitch this time, just another fastball down the heart. Jimmy drove through the ball with his legs, and he caught it solid, a rifle shot to right center. The ball landed between the outfielders and rolled all the way to the fence. Hill scored easily. With 2 outs, Duncan was off on contact. We were going crazy on the bench, jumping up and down as he raced around the bases. Their center fielder hit the relay man, but the throw home was way up the line. Duncan scored the winning run standing up. We mobbed Jimmy at second base. You'd have thought we'd won the title right then and there the way we acted. We lifted him on our shoulders, carried him off the field. We were hollering so much and so long in the shower room that Charant finally came in, blew his whistle. "That was one game," he shouted. "Don't forget it." We quieted, but in our hearts we felt that we were on our way, that nothing could stop us. Jimmy came over. "How's your back?" I'd forgotten about it. I looked down and saw a huge black bruise. "It hurts," I said, smiling. Jimmy put both of his hands on my shoulders and looked me in the eye. "That took more guts than I've got, Seth." Chapter 8. The next morning I kept looking for Jimmy at school. I don't know what I wanted to say exactly. Maybe I didn't want to say anything. Maybe all I wanted was to be near him, to feed off his magic, because on the diamond that's what he was, magic. I looked around for him before school, during lunch, but I never tracked him down. In fact, I didn't see him until I was in the locker room dressing for practice. He was surrounded by Alex Furman, Dan Hill, and those guys. They were joking around like everybody. We were all feeling pretty loosey-goosey. Then Charant stuck his head in. "Jimmy Winter," he shouted, "to my office." "What's it about?" a couple of guys asked Jimmy as he wound his way through the locker room. Jimmy shrugged. "Beats me." I got a sick feeling as I watched Jimmy disappear into the office. And I wasn't the only one. The place turned into a morgue. I finished dressing, trudged out to the field, and played some catch with Alan Willis. Finally, Charant came out without Jimmy. Gentlemen, he said, his face grim, Jimmy Winter has been suspended from the team. He seems to have forgotten that to play on a school team, you have to attend school. So let me remind all of you, family first, school second, baseball third. He clapped his hands. Now let's get going. I want a good practice today. You get in your head that one thing is the problem and you forget about everything else. I'd been worried that drinking would bring Jimmy down. Cutting classes? I didn't have a clue he was doing that. Sharon put Duncan at second and moved me to shortstop. I felt all wrong there. It was Jimmy's spot, not mine. The throw from the hole seemed miles long. I one-hopped most of them over to Dorrego. You're not at second base, Barnum, Sharon kept hollering. You can't arm the ball over to first. Plant your back foot and throw. As I walked home, my mind was on Jimmy, not on baseball. Everything was there for him, just waiting for him to reach out and grab it, so why was he acting so stupid? As I turned up the walkway to my house, Jimmy popped out at me from behind a tree. Hey, Seth, you got a minute? Yeah, sure, I answered, getting a hold of myself. Just let me check with my mother. It's dinner time, Seth, she said. Mom, it's important. She frowned. Okay, only make it quick. I shook my head. It might not be quick. All right, she answered. I'll put your plate in the oven. Jimmy and I walked over to Henry Ford and sat on the swings. What's going on, Jimmy? I asked. Why are you doing this to yourself? He looked annoyed. Seth, what have I done that's so awful? Sometimes I wake up and I don't feel like facing history and English and math, so I go to Tom Wells, hit some balls, hang out until it's time for baseball practice. Where's the big crime? I thought for a while. No big crime, Jimmy, I said, but you've got to pass your classes to play. That's how it works. School is stupid, he said. I shrugged. You've got to do it. Yeah, he said. I've heard it a million times. We sat for a couple of minutes. Look, he finally said, I need a favor. Sure, what is it? I'm supposed to write a term paper on Turkey for history class. Those papers kill me, but I bet you could whip something out pretty fast. I felt almost sick. Jimmy, I'll help you if you want, but I won't write it for you. Why not? It doesn't have to be good. Actually, it'd be better if it was lousy. If it's too good, Miss Layla will suspect. I don't want to cheat. Oh, come off it, Seth. It's not like I'm headed to Stanford or applying for a job at the UN. All I want to do is play ball. He picked up a rock and tossed it. Do I have to beg? I took a deep breath. Okay, I'll do it. I don't want to, but I'll do it. We walked back then, and Jimmy to his house and me to mine. Neither of us said a word as we parted. When I opened my front door, the last thing I wanted was another argument, but that's what I got. So, my mother said, what's that about? Nothing, I answered. No, Seth, it's not about nothing. I want to hear what's going on. I flopped down on the sofa. I left out the stuff about writing his paper, but I told her everything else about Jimmy's suspension. It's not fair, I said when I'd finished. What else could the coach have done, she asked. Oh, I don't know, I thought for a second. Why should Jimmy have to go to school? He's going to be a major leaguer. He'll make millions. Why can't he just play ball? Seth, I don't know why our world is the way it is, she said, and I'm not going to pretend I do. Driving to work, I look at all the people in their cars, and most of them don't want to be going where they're going. I sure don't want to be. I don't know why we all can't do exactly what we want to do, but the world doesn't work that way. She frowned. And there's something else, too, something that you know and I know, though you've been trying to keep it from me, and maybe from yourself. Your friend isn't some sort of Peter Pan who just wants to play in the park all day. Jimmy's got a drug problem, or a drinking problem, or both. You don't know that, I snapped. She folded her arms across her chest. I can't prove it, Seth, but I know it, and you know it too. I did my homework, took a shower, and went to bed, but it took me so long to fall asleep that I was exhausted. The next morning, so when I saw Jimmy in the library before school, I tried to dodge him. I didn't feel like talking to anybody. But he spotted me, motioned me over. Seth, forget about what I asked you to do yesterday. You mean the paper? I said, not sure I understood. Yeah. I was startled. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. I'll help if you want. The bell rang. I can do it myself, Jimmy said as he gathered his books for class. You think I'm stupid, but I'm not. I could tell he was angry. I hadn't meant to humiliate him, but I guess I had. I didn't care, though. The important thing was that he was taking school as a challenge, and I'd never known Jimmy to back down from a challenge. Everything is going to be okay, I told myself as I went off to class. Everything is going to work out just fine.